my screen. Let me know if you guys can see it. The topic that I'm going to discuss today is ethical data labeling. So I really hope that this is going to be a topic that's going to be quite relevant to what everyone is working on. And hopefully it's going to give everybody food for thought, for their future projects and how they're handling the labeling of the data that they're using. So I just wanted to start in order to get a feeling of the audience today. If you can just raise your hand if you've ever done manual data labeling yourself. If I can get like a show of hands of everyone. Okay, so yeah, some people I'm seeing. Has anybody here used Amazon's Mechanical Turk to perform the data labeling? Or any type of third-party solution for annotation? Okay, a couple of people. All right. So yeah, I think this is going to be really interesting, especially if you have done data labeling yourself. You're gonna know, the let's say how labor consuming the whole process is, and if you have worked with any type of outsourcing solution, be it Mechanical Turk or another service provider, you will also have seen how complex the actual process is, and how difficult it is to get it right, be it because of quality, because of understanding, because of labeler management, and so on. So I'm just going to start by talking about the shift that we're kind of witnessing right now towards data-centric AI. People like Andrew have reiterated that model tweaking can improve models only marginally, while better data can actually be the real game changer. So I'm really trying to also insist on that when we work with clients through humans in the loop, that if the data is garbage, of course you're going to get a garbage result when you train a model on it, even if it's a really good model, and that's kind of common sense already, right? But it also requires a shift in the mentality from model-centric to data-centric. So the idea here is that if you're building AI in a model-centric way, you collect whatever data you can, and then you build a model that is good enough to deal with the noise in the data. And then you hold the data fixed and iteratively improve the code or the model. And then if there are any errors in the results, you try to tune the model, and you just have this focus on big data that could ideally, compensate for the noise that is present in the data. The data-centric approach is a little bit more different because it focuses on the consistency and the quality of data. So high-quality data allows multiple models to do well. And then if you're finding errors, you need to fix the data and iteratively improve it rather than focus so much on the model. And the focus here is on good data. So, the problem here is that a lot of the data labeling and, verification is time consuming and manual, especially if you want to have segmentation or, more complex types of annotation, like Sarah mentioned. If you have a very complex taxonomy, if you want to be monitoring the results and then iteratively improving the data set, it actually requires a lot of work. So this is why a lot of companies are trying to either outsource it, automate it, find a way to skip it. And here actually I also wanted to mention some new publications about model work and data work. So among the community is just, let's say, not such a prestigious activity to work on the data. And data quality is frequently undervalued. So as I mentioned, if you're working on an AI model, you try to either augment the data in some way or try to automate the process. But then, there are some data cascades, as they have been called, which are very frequently invisible, and they happen whenever, an issue is triggered within the data labeling process. So one of the solutions that has been proposed by specifically the authors of this paper is that there has to be more incentives for data excellence as a first-class citizen of AI. So not to undermine the data work as something not so prestigious, but to actually uplift it and to give it more prestige, more importance, either in research and conferences, just as an activity, just because it has such an important role for AI. So one of the first problems, if we're talking about ethical data labeling, we have the supply chain. So this is, ethical problem number one. Who is doing this labeling? Here, I actually want to recommend an essay by Kate Crawford and Vladan Joler called Anatomy of an AI System. They discuss the whole production and of the Amazon Echo as an AI product, and all of the systems behind it, including the data labeling. And here she discusses specifically the origin of Amazon's Mechanical Turk. Most probably you guys are already familiar with this contraption from the 16th century where a human was hiding and was playing chess, and then it appeared like an actual robot was doing it, but there was a human underneath the actual figure. So the story of how Amazon's Mechanical Turk appeared was that the researchers at Amazon were failing to implement AI for finding duplicate product pages on the website. And this is how they actually built this platform where humans could work behind the computers and classify these images. And then they opened it up to anybody in academia or other companies in order to have access to such a digital workshop, which could, help to train AI systems as well as, fill out surveys and anything else. And currently, I would say it's the widest used platform, both in academia and also in the industry. So there are a couple of things that are wrong with Amazon Mechanical Turk, especially when we're talking about large-scale image data sets like, Imagenet and so on. It actually, of course, would have been impossible to label these very large-scale data sets if it weren't for the people on Mechanical Turk. So currently, there are more than 500,000 people on the platform. A lot of them are American, but they're earning way lower than local minimum wage. And this is partly because of the fact that tasks are being broken down into very, very small pieces. So the minimum payment for a task on the platform is just 1 cent. So a lot of people are just completing tasks that are taking them, a couple of seconds or up to a minute to perform, but they're earning cent by cent their payment, and in a lot of cases they just can't get close to the minimum wage, no matter how fast they work. So in terms of Imagenet, it actually took 50,000 people to approximately to label the entire data set, and they categorized more than 14 million images. So it's really, it's a type of scale that no other platform can offer currently, and it actually has propelled this boom in deep learning, specifically in computer vision. So on the one hand, its role is really, really crucial. But then, as I've mentioned, there are tons of issues with payments on the platform and actually ensuring dignified work conditions for the people who are on it. So this is also the point where we should talk about click work as an entire industry, because it's not only Mechanical Turk, but also a lot of different other platforms, companies around the world, especially in the developing world, who are delivering this type of click services. And humans in the loop is actually one of them. So the idea is that, okay, it's just a very easy type of job. You pay people very little, and people usually work from home. So it's the ultimate gig work economy, and it hides a lot of different very problematic aspects in terms of the employment status of people, whether they have access to any benefits, the type of work that they perform, the risk of burnout, stress, and so on. So it's really a very sensitive place to be in terms of our company as well. So I'm going to share a little bit more about what we're doing and how we're trying to mitigate all of these risks. But there is definitely such an industry, and especially the AI industry is feeding off of it on a daily basis. The second ethical problem that we can discuss when we're talking about data labeling is framing the labeling task, and this is more on the people who are requesting it, on the requesters and the clients. And here we can talk again about these canonical data sets like Imagenet. Another essay by Kate Crawford and Trevor Paquin, Excavating AI. I highly recommend it if you're interested in the politics of images and machine learning training sets. They talk about the mere idea of labeling an image and saying what there is on the image. There are plenty of things that they discuss, among which is the Imagenet Dataset. The problem in Imagenet was that it was built off or on top of the WordNet taxonomy. So of course, their goal was to represent the entirety of human world and human reality. So they just took all of the definitions and notions in WordNet and they tried to collect images for them. But the problem here was that for a lot of words, there weren't any appropriate images, and a lot of words were what they afterwards discovered non-imageable. So for example, there is this word of second-rater, mediocrity, and there are some people there as an illustration of that word. And this is becoming very problematic because also WordNet contains a lot of sexual slurs, a lot of offensive notions, and because Imagenet was such a large endeavor and a high-scale endeavor, the researchers just didn't go through every single notion and review what there was in terms of the illustrations of these notions. So this is how it became very problematic. And I think around 10 years after the publication of the dataset, the researchers actually came up with a new paper discussing the drawbacks and the failures of Imagenet, particularly in the field of offensive notions and also non-imageable notions. So another very similar case is the Tiny Images dataset, which was published back in around 2006, but recently it was pulled down because it just contained too many slurs and offensive notions, and which were illustrated with images in this dataset. And a lot of people just didn't take this into account, and they didn't pay attention to this. But it became such a big problem that they just decided that it was impossible to fix it. It would be too hard, and they just took it down. So, we can discuss bias and labels, but a lot of these core ethical problems are actually rooted in the taxonomy and what the request of the client is in terms of, okay, collect 500 images of this notion or another notion, which afterwards the labelers collect and annotate. So in a lot of cases, the problem is actually in defining the classes and defining the scope of the project. And then we have bias labels. This can take the form of biased data collection and also biased data annotation. And we have quite a lot of issues here. For example, racial and ethnical bias, due to the lack of representation of different ethnicities in the data sets. For example, on the right, we have a governmental system for ID verification, which apparently was not trained on enough Asian faces. So, this can be quite harmful, especially when it's being implemented by governments, and especially, we're not going to even touch the subject of surveillance and so on. On the bottom right is actually an interesting case in which the AI system was giving different predictions depending on the color of the hand, which was holding an electric thermometer. When the hand was had a black color, the classification was hand and gun, while when it was white, it was hand and monocular. So the question here is that it's not only important to have a balanced data set, but also, the entire composition of the images that you're feeding the model will influence how it ends up interpreting a specific picture. And then we have a lot of gender bias as well. On the image on the left, we have a keywording model, which actually, in order to determine whether the person on the image is a man or a woman, just uses heuristics or tries to find, clues in the environment. So whenever it sees a computer, it just immediately guesses that the person is a man sitting at a desk. So this type of, captioning system. On the bottom, we have the Marie Curie being labeled as an angry woman when all the people around her are neutral men. This is definitely, again, a problem of labels and representation of women, angry women, and anger in general. The Kate Crawford essay about excavating AI is also interesting because she talks about how emotions are actually present in data sets, because in a lot of cases, the representation of emotions is not what they actually look like. Maybe, when you're training a model with images that are displaying anger or happiness or sadness, the emotions performed by the people are very exaggerated, maybe as it's something that people don't actually look like when they're actually angry. So there's a lot to talk about here about emotion detection. And then on the right, we have this case of congressmen and congresswomen, which were run through, some generic detection and captioning models. I think this one was in particular Google's, and then of course the men were tagged as public speaking, business person, official, suit, and so on, and all the women were tagged depending on their appearance, with a smile, black hair, hairstyle, and chin, actually very curiously for a lot of the women. And it has been proven that a lot of the gender classifiers of the big companies are very much biased against darker people and also females. So darker females have the least score usually in terms of classification and recognition. So a lot of these things are problems that are very deeply rooted into the AI industry. And it's not easy to solve bias in labeling, but one step towards this is impact sourcing. And this is an industry that we also belong to. So this is a map of different impact sourcing enterprises, and it's amazing because there is actually so much going on in terms of enterprises which are employing people in need of employment from vulnerable groups, and they're trying to channel this type of data labeling work towards them. And the commitment here is that it's going to be easy, accessible work, similar to the one of Mechanical Turk, but it's also going to come with some dignified conditions for people to work. So this is kind of the crucial distinction that impact sourcing companies are pledging to ensure that people are actually going to have opportunities for career growth, for upskilling, and so on. Then we have, responsible procurement, which is actually the key in order for these impact sourcing enterprises to prosper and to thrive, And I wanted to share the example of one company, which is actually the only company that I've seen in the industry so far, which develops AI models and has a social responsibility section on their website. talking about how they source data and how they pick their labeling partners. Okay, so this is something that really falls on the shoulders of people who are requesting labeling for them to prioritize such suppliers, because without that personal initiative of choosing a responsible supplier, then of course the cheapest ones will always get the deal, and without making sure that they are ensuring dignified conditions. As a client, you're just becoming part of the problem. So this is also a little bit about us. We're part of this impact sourcing landscape. We're trying to train our people to become humans in the loop, okay, to kind of become professionalized in this work of data labeling, data collection, and model validation as well. So we work in these three areas. We're very much focused on dataset annotation. This is where most of our inquiries are coming from, but we also perform dataset collection, which is arguably even more challenging in terms of ethics, diversity, and so on. And what we're trying to promote is model validation. So once a model is trained, to also have additional and ongoing human supervision in order to make sure that there is no model drift, that the model is performing well, that there is no bias, and so on. We have two pillars. As I mentioned, upskilling is a main part of what we do and what it means to be an impact sourcing provider. The other one is remote work. And we're really taking advantage of the fact that data labeling is a type of employment that we can provide to people in a very flexible manner. They can work from anywhere. It's very accessible to women who have to manage their household, childcare, and so on. So we're really trying to take this niche and make it suitable for people who would otherwise be excluded from the labor market. This is our network. Our headquarters is in Bulgaria, but we're employing refugees and conflict-affected people in the entire Middle East, including Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And we also work with a lot of technical partners, which are data annotation tools, labeling tools, dataset curation tools as well. And these are the ones who are actually providing us with the means to perform the data labeling. Currently, we're very focused on ensuring that the dataset work that we do is diverse, bias-free. It's, of course, a really challenging task, but our current efforts are split into two directions. So first, when we collect datasets, making sure that there is a fair representation of different regions, genders, ages, ethnicities, and so on. We have a mobile app which allows us to gather images directly, and ideally to also get the consent of people whose images are being used, not only when it's images of them, but also images taken by them. So through this mobile app, we can actually ensure that all of the images that are used for a particular dataset are compensated to their author, and they're consensually used. In terms of diverse data set, there is a lot to talk about, but I can mention, two examples that do not even have anything to do with age, gender, ethnicity, and so on. One is Objectnet, which is a very interesting example of non-iconic images that data sets need in order to actually be robust in different situations. So the authors of the Objectnet dataset recognize that in Imagenet and other canonical datasets, a lot of the objects are shown in very canonical situations, just a chair in front of you in an up-front position. So what they said is that they wanted to create a data set which was more diverse in terms of rotation, background, viewpoint, and different situations and so on. So this is something that we're trying to implement, not only when we're talking about humans appearing in the data set, but anything, objects, making sure that we have a diversity of objects from a diversity of regions and so on. And then, of course, trying to avoid iconical situations as much as possible. There was one case in which a model was trained on a data set, including images of skateboards. In 80 or 90% of the cases, the skateboard was co-occurring with a person. So what it ended up doing is, when there was a picture of a skateboard without the person, the model wasn't even able to recognize it, just because it was too different from what I was used to seeing. So we're really trying to think about, okay, what are the different cases in which this particular object could be appearing in real life, and making sure that we're not only compiling data sets which are iconic, and that might transmit a certain type of stereotype. And then secondly, we have bias trainings for our workers. This is something that we've rolled out recently, and it's a very simple training which teaches annotators about bias. In a lot of cases, bias, or people on Mechanical Turk, they do not know what their work is going towards. They do not know what you're building, why they have to annotate these images, or this data set, what it means if they make a mistake or if they misclassify an image. So on the one hand, this is about raising awareness among annotators about their role in the entire AI pipeline, and also it's about training them to recognize and spot different biases in the data set that they're working on, and also to report them. So this is the key thing in order to be able to just flag an image and say, okay, this is an edge case, this is an unusual image, this is a bad image, in terms of also, if they have worked through the entire data set, they know what the composition of the data set, and then they can report on it and say, I've actually seen a lot of images of white people in this data set, or people appearing in this situation. So if we empower annotators to participate actively in this type of bias detection, I think that we have a lot to gain across the entire pipeline. We've been very much engaged in, reviewing the available literature, talking to researchers about how we can avoid bias in specifically computer vision AI, because this is our field of focus, through better data collection and better data annotation. So we've published so far the first part of this white paper series. We're going to publish the second part very soon as well on our website. I invite you all to read it. I think it's going to be really also interesting to hear your feedback, because we're really trying to recognize and acknowledge our role in the AI pipeline, and to see what we can do in order to raise awareness among our clients, and also do our job better in order to benefit all of us in the end. We've also been collaborating, as I mentioned, with several researchers. One of them is this amazing lady called Milagros Micheli. She has done some field research with us, documenting our annotation practices, and she has some really great insight on how computer vision data sets are being documented. Whoops, sorry, let me just plug my computer in to make sure I don't disappear suddenly. So we have done a lot of work with her in terms of spotting subjectivity and imposition, and power dynamics in general for data annotation, and how annotators, by annotating and collecting data, they're actually making reality. So this entire process of power, visibility, the production of data sets. So I highly recommend her research. Most recently, she has published some findings on subjectivity and imposition in data annotation, and she has discovered exactly this, that the role of clients is actually really crucial, because they're the ones who possess the power and the authority to give, to make the frame for the entire annotation project or data collection project. And in a lot of cases, it's not that workers themselves are biased, but that they're giving, or they're being imposed, a certain type of interpretation that they have to implement when they're working on the data set. So of course, this is not to absolve ourselves from any responsibility, but it's, very interesting to explore this area of, the power relations within that dataset labeling and what they mean in order for us to make sure that datasets are bias free. This is one book that I am very excited about. It's going to be coming out, I think, quite soon. This is Kate Crawford's Atlas of AI, and if you're interested in it, I think it's going to be a really interesting read in terms of the entire industry that is giving shape to AI. She's a really great researcher. So yeah, this is all from me. Thank you guys so much. And if you have any questions, I would be really happy to respond.